President Trump now says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is a dictator, threatening that if Zelensky doesn't roll over, he's not going to have a country left. The aggressive change on Donald Trump's tone came after Zelensky said the American president is living in a disinformation bubble, his words, a response to Trump's upside-down claim that it was Zelensky, not Putin, who started the war.
I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago. The leader in Ukraine, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And where a country has been blown to smithereens. You've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
It's not just Zelensky who is feeling the whiplash. It's Western Europe as well, as leaders try to figure out what to do now that their biggest ally and their friend, the United States, is suddenly acting more like an adversary. Joining us now from Kharkiv, NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. Richard, give us the latest.
The reaction here is, as expected, a lot of fear. Ukrainians are very vulnerable at this moment. They are still under attack. The city where I am right now in Kharkiv is under attack daily. I was at the front lines earlier, just on the outskirts of the city, and Russians attack with missiles and drones constantly, especially when the weather is clear and the drones get a good view of the tanks and of the positions, and you can see right now some of the soldiers we were talking to, and you get a sense of the freezing conditions. These soldiers, in particular, this particular unit, have been at that particular post just outside of Kharkiv for the last 3 years. One of the soldiers told me he hadn't had any leave except for 10 days off over the last 3 years. So when you talk to these soldiers and you tell them, oh, by the way, the United States might not support you anymore, and President Trump believes that Ukraine was responsible for launching the war, it makes them offended. It lowers morale, the soldiers told me, and it has a direct impact because they're there right now, freezing in that trench, and they're not sure if they have an ally anymore in President Trump. And it seems, talking to Ukrainians here, that many people believe that President Putin and President Trump are in effect ganging up on them together and somehow plotting to divide this country.
What option does President Zelensky have? He's not at the negotiating table. Does he have an option to keep on fighting if the United States pulls out?
Well, he's trying to figure that out, and Ukraine can keep fighting, but it will be very difficult, and the Europeans are frankly not in a position right now to provide the same kind of troops, the same kind of, the U.S. isn't providing troops here, but I should say providing the same sort of weapons and support for Ukrainian troops. So the U.S. is really an irreplaceable ally, and President Zelensky has said as much, that he doesn't believe that he would be able to replace American support if it were suddenly taken away. And I've been speaking to people in Zelensky's office as well, and one of them told me, a very senior advisor who I've known for some time, that he believes a lot of this row goes down to President Trump's demand for minerals. That has gotten a little bit lost in all of this, and that, Katie, as you know, is happening in the States almost every day, where so much is coming out that people forget. I spoke with this official in Zelensky's office, and he described to me how a Trump administration official came with a document, no negotiation, and said, "You must sign this." And on the document was a pledge that President Zelensky was supposed to sign, handing over 50% of this country's mineral rights, particularly rare earth minerals, and that President Zelensky didn't sign it and was told at the time, President Trump's not going to like that. He's going to be angry, and he still didn't sign it. And now we're seeing this war of words escalating, which has a much more profound implication than just a war of words or an argument.
Yeah, Richard Engel in Kharkiv for us. Richard, thank you. And joining us now, editor of The Insider, Michael Weiss. Michael, it's really good to have you. It's not even just Ukraine. It's Western Europe that is suddenly feeling like they've lost an ally. You had that emergency informal meeting with Western leaders in Paris the other day. What position are they now in with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin negotiating without anybody else involved?
Well, I think it's sort of a mixture of emotions and a trying to get to the bottom of what's really going on here. I've spoken to European intelligence officials who say, look, we're unclear. There's a lot of contradictory lines of communication, a lot of chaos, and we don't actually see a deal coming together just yet. So we're in sort of a wait and see mode. That said, I also spoken to European officials who think that the United States is objectively and subjectively now on Russia's side. I mean, to me, the writing has been on the wall for quite a while. And in a way, I think Trump has done us an inadvertent favor in being so clearly and nakedly pro-Russia. I mean, this is not really a negotiation when you are wholesale adopting Russian propaganda as your starting point, right? Calling Zelensky a dictator who must hold elections. I mean, there's martial law in Ukraine. As a matter of constitutionality, they don't need to and they cannot hold elections. So the first order of business is lifting martial law, which carries with it a host of complications in terms of the ongoing military effort. The demand for immediate elections, by the way, is a Russian demand. So why are we right out of the gate acceding to that in exchange for what? Nothing. I mean, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, it's very interesting. This is a man who a year ago wrote a letter to President Biden on the back of an investigation I was a part of, which suggested the GRU, that's Russian military intelligence, has been attacking Americans with directed energy weapons, so-called Havana syndrome. Well, now he says that actually there's a great deal that we can cooperate with the Russians on geopolitically and economically. Well, which is it? Is Russia at war with not only Ukraine and parts of Europe, but also the United States? Or are they the best friend we just haven't made yet? And I think you need only see, Katie, the Russian reaction to this. Dmitry Medvedev, who is a rather uncorked and erratic, but I think kind of an interesting bellwether for the most hawkish element in the Russian Federation, tweeted, I mean, he's practically hugging himself with glee. He said, I could not have imagined even months ago an American president taking this line and calling Zelensky a dictator. And by the way, not just a dictator, but also a con artist and a thief who's stolen U.S. money. Falsehoods that can be easily debunked by anybody who bothers to check the actual public agency if it hasn't been hollowed out by DOJ yet, which is responsible for auditing all U.S. security assistance, the bulk of which, I remind you, goes to United States manufacturing. A lot of the money we send to, quote, Ukraine actually gets spent here to develop new weapon systems for our army while we pass hand-me-down weapons and ammunition to the Ukrainians, for which they've been very grateful. But beware the law of unintended consequences. It is true Zelensky's been increasingly unpopular in recent days, and that you would expect that from a war-weary and exhausted president who's been in power for as long as he has. But today he got a shot in the arm. I'm seeing memes from Ukrainians. One is a picture of guys having a fist fight, and that's the state of Ukrainian politics in a normal condition. And the other is Ukrainians sat very in a civilized manner around a circular table. This is what happens in Ukraine when Trump attacks our state and our president. So the United States might have inadvertently boosted Zelensky's popularity, which, by the way, was much higher than 4%, as Donald Trump falsely stated the other day.
Really interesting. Michael, we're going to have to have you back for a longer conversation. Thank you for joining us.